شتي قول عني دائما متخمم عني مشيت عنهم وزلت صغيرة. وقولها نذكر أمي ذيك الساعة لا شوي بعد لا في الخيال قول نذكر بيها تمشي بيا شرب في السوق تشري لنا الدعم.
The filmmakers Violeta Ayala and Dan Falshaw join us. Good morning to both of you.
Good morning, Fran.
If I can ask you, Dan, you went to the Western Sahara to record a family reunion, but you say you found modern-day slavery instead. What exactly do you mean by that?
I guess within the camps, the black Sahrawis, they consider themselves, some of them consider themselves slaves. And that means that they are actually owned by somebody else, that they're the property of another person.
And Violeta, what does that mean in real life, to be owned by somebody?
Well, I think the definition of modern-day slavery, I don't know if that's correct. I think that this is old centuries slavery that kept continue and modified or in different manifestations. Being a slave is a person that actually it's owned by someone else.
Let's look at that, because in the movie, clearly the people who you describe as enslaved, as owned by somebody else, seem to have freedom of movement. They seem to have their own lives going on. For instance, Fatima is a teacher. She has a life. She lives in her own house with her own family. What about that is slavery?
Well, we covered within the film. We actually cover Fatima's story that she's a teacher. Being a slave doesn't preclude the freedom of movement. Boubacar Massoud, who's a long-time anti-slavery campaigner in Mauritania, has said that publicly several times. But I think it was very difficult for us to get our heads around what slavery meant while we were in the camps. And it really is, for people outside of... it's so difficult to explain in a short time.
The last definition of Anti-Slavery International, one of the things that said it's physically and mentally constrained, put restriction, and doesn't necessarily preclude the freedom of movement.
Okay.
I think also the film doesn't say that Fatima is or is not a slave. Her mother and her sister say that she's a slave. The film shows, I think the only person who knows is Fatima. And
Fatima says that everything in the film is not true. She says she's not a slave. And she says that in the back end of your film.
Yeah. And there is 9 people in the film that talk about slavery. This film, it's about our experiences, chronicles our story and what happened to us and how the people came to us and tell us this story. It's not, it's about every viewer of the film to make up their own mind. And
one thing that confused me, or I was wondering as I watched the film, is Fatima is still there. She clearly misses her mother and her sisters, but she stayed in the camp for 30 years. What's your understanding of why she is there? Are you saying that's linked to the fact that she's enslaved?
Fatima was separated from her mother when she was 3 years old. She didn't travel to the camps until she was a little older. She was taken away from her mother because Mbaka, Fatima's mother, was a slave to Dado's father. And Dado, from what Mbaka told us, always wanted Fatima as her own. And she took her away from Mbaka when she was 3 years old.
But why didn't Fatima leave?
No. You can't leave.
You can't leave the refugee camps.
So you're saying Fatima was not allowed to leave, and that's why she's still there?
The refugee camps have been running for 30 years, and the people who live there feel that it's their responsibility and their duty to the Polisario and the Sahrawi cause to remain in the camps and to fight for independence.
I don't necessarily, like Fatima never met her mother or didn't remember what's a mother. A mother for her is this woman who took her to the camps. If somebody takes my kid, regardless if they put it in a palace or make it a king, still they are committing a human rights crime. They're taking away my kid. Fatima does not have a bond with her mother, or doesn't. To me, appears that she doesn't. And that's why it's very hard. If the only mother that you know is this woman, that in one hand she punishes you, and in another hand she she gives whatever you have. It's very hard. She is in a terrible situation. I feel very, very sorry for her.
Okay, well, she's here in Australia, as we said. She was brought out by the Polisario. She was at the film festival last night. Let's have a listen to her.
Practically everything in the film is not true. That she's a slave, that her mother is a slave.
Everything in the film is not true. She was there speaking through a translator. What does it do to you to hear that?
When we first saw that retraction and the statement she made in a video, we were devastated. I didn't know what to think. Really,
But it's not the first time you heard it. It's captured in the film. In the film you show her daughter clearly scared and upset, saying to you, you tried to do good but you did bad. So that was while you were filming. Did that make you stop? Did you realise then that you were impacting on their lives?
We felt we had a moral obligation to tell their story. Lael, who was on the phone to me in that scene you're referring to, was extremely upset at that time. And they're not the only people who told us their stories. There are several people in the film who spoke out against slavery, and they wanted their stories heard. There was a group of men who travelled 2,000 kilometres across the desert to come and tell their stories to us when we didn't know whether or not our tapes were stolen and we could tell their story. They wanted to tell their story again in case that happened. And
that's true, and that's very strong. They say they have no legal rights. They say it's time to stand up. They say that the women folk can't get married because they are enslaved. But this is all denied by the Polisario, and it's even denied to some extent by the UN person you speak to there at the camps.
Well, the UN, when they talk about slavery in the camps on the ground, they say that the implication is that they didn't know it existed. But when we travelled to the UN in Geneva, the Deputy Director for North Africa said that they know it exists, they know it happens in the camps, but also in the area where the camps exist.
But Human Rights Watch, which investigated this after your movie, using your film as a lot of their evidence, said that although they did find some evidence of slavery, particularly regards to marriage, they spoke to the Polisario, who said they were trying to stamp it out.
I think that Human Rights Watch, it's in a very, very difficult political position. You have to read between the lines. I think that they've been going there for 8 years and they need to keep going there.
I think the Polisario, I'm absolutely thrilled if they can stamp it out. Human Rights Watch reports dates that a few places, but it says that the Polisario is on record as firmly opposing slavery in all its manifestations. Nevertheless, it must do more to eradicate residual slavery practices that continue to affect some black residents of the Tindouf camps. They claim it exists, and they say that the Polisario should do more to get rid of it. And the Polisario on record is saying they want to get rid of it. So I'm all for that. You too have made a movie. In the process of that, you've done what you think is trying to reveal a discrimination, enslavement of people. You've been called all sorts of names for that. Do you feel betrayed by the people who you filmed, who you worked with there? No, if you understand the concept of slavery, it's not a surprise. Fatim's been the subject of systematic abuse her entire life, and we're not surprised that she's come to Australia to say this, although we feel very deeply for her, and we do understand that she didn't want to leave the camps and she didn't want to leave her children behind. Have you spoken to Fatima since she's been here? We spoke to her briefly last night, and all she said to us was, they told me not to talk to you. Another thing, it's that, what I wanted to say, well, it's very, when you understand what slavery means, to be a free person, you need to learn to make decisions and to have your own opinion. They humanize that process on a person. This happens all through North Africa, not just in the Polisario refugee camps. It happens in Mauritania. Much more studies been done there because it's been more Kevin Bales and the Disposable People. It's a great book to read. It's hard, it's tough for her. But this is the modus operandi of the Polisario. It's another case in Spain about Sultana, and Sultana is a girl who claimed that she was a slave, and the Polisario took her mother against daughter. The mother was saying that Sultana is not a slave. It's not the first time. Okay. This is the second time internationally for them. Okay, Violetta and Dan, thank you very much for your time. Thanks you. Filmmakers Violetta Ayala and Dan Falshaw, the makers of the movie called Stolen.